So, December 2020, time for another update to what's been happening on my railway. Well, the summer intervened, and with the good weather, the urge to be outside intervened. So, things paused for a number of months. But the last couple of months, there has been activity once again, so let's take a look at what I've been up to. The main thing is, I now have some scenery. And this is quite an achievement. It's the first time I've had scenery on a railway since, since I was a teenager, so quite a long time. So this whole portion of this side of the layout has gained the blue styrofoam stuff as the basis of the profiles of the landscape. Plaster of Paris slapped on top. And in some places, the sort of impregnated cloth has been used. You can see a little bit of it there. And, brown paint on everything. And then it's got a layer of that funky colored sawdust stuff on top to provide something to provide a foundation. And some areas have had this different types of flocking applied. This is going to be a kind of grazing field, so mowed lawn or mowed grass is probably more appropriate. I've been experimenting with bushes, so far just using lichen. It was state of the art when I last had a railway with scenery in the last century sometime, but it's definitely not the best compared to what others are achieving these days. So I'm going to keep working with it, maybe experimenting with putting some flock on top of it, that sort of stuff. It's got some promise. The shape is good, but I've seen so many better landscaping attempts on others layouts that, the inspiration does carry. So I'm feeling inspired to experiment a bit more. I have been experimenting with static grass, however, and it's working quite nicely. I'm still getting the hang of it, figuring out what lengths to apply where, getting the hang of applying it. Like many people, I built one of these easy peasy applicators, bug zapper with a tea strainer. So simple. Again, one of those things where I found a video of somebody else doing it on YouTube, went, hey, I can do that. And discovered, yeah, it actually was fairly easy, and it's working quite well. So cheap and effective. I like that. The static grass, I am still figuring out, as I said. You see, it's kind of getting there. I need to do more work to practice applying it and getting a better sense of what lengths should go where. But it's getting there, This is the first stretch that I've done it on, this chunk here, so I may pass back and redo it later, or bury it under bushes and trees to a degree. But it's a reasonable start. So you can get the idea of how the landscape is going to shape up. The main up and down lines loop back on themselves via a tunnel. There's going to be lots of trees to hide, or rather provide some scenic break between the pair of tracks that go up and over and then onto the helix. And a little sort of signal box over here to control the junction. It's a bit of weathering, needs a lot of, embedding in the landscape, but we're really just beginning here. So far, it's not too bad. I'm kind of pleased with how it's beginning. So I also have my first 2 trees. Woohoo! Little birch type things. I picked up a couple of packages of these guys from a friend in Alberta. So they're good inspiration as much as anything else. And sort of the next things that we plan to start working on are building our own trees. And here's experiment number 1. Oh boy, it's a good experiment. I'm definitely learning from doing it. So stiff wire in the center, the thin cables out of Ethernet wire wrapped around that, and then some painter's masking tape on top of that. and I'm going to try and get some of that paint on latex stuff that Woodland Scenics do to sort of cover that up. So a good experiment. I may not carry this one onwards, but good way to practice some techniques. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Practice. Practice, experiment, and it's never done. It's continuous creation working on a model railway. So I said I got distracted over the summer months when it was warm by being outside. And one of the things that did capture my attention during the summer was catching up on some repaint projects. So you'll notice there's a theme here, blue. So here's a couple of Bachmann 37.4s. They were originally that stripy Udate one. So they're going to be a couple of other 37.4s from the Cardiff pool. A few 47s, two Lima ones, and a Vitrains one on the right there. And a couple of Hornby 31s. Originally they were green and yellow. And the one that's closest to being finished is a Bachmann 20. One I just sort of acquired in green somewhere along the way. And it's been in the box wondering what to do with it. So I thought, let's get some variety happening for the 20s. I've got a few blue ones, I've got the Tinsley pair, I've got the two-tone grey 20088. So that doesn't leave a lot of variety, apart from the Thornaby ones with the red stripes. So Bachmann did 2172, so this one's going to be 173. It's probably going to be the last Class 20 I repaint, as well as the first, because, oh my, those handrails, holy smoke, I don't want to tackle that again. Lots of wagons as well got repainted. Here's a Bachmann Queen Mary that was in EWS. You can see the buffer beams have still got the EWS red. And lots of other things. Bunch of Bachmann OCAs, again they were in EWS, and they're going to become pretty grubby and faded ones. They've been repainted in a faded version of the Rail Freight Red. And one of the things that is almost completed, and I'm kind of quite happy with, is this train over here. These coil wagons were also in EWS colors when I got them, so they've had a complete repaint. I've mixed up the ends on them. They were all five had the same ends, and I've mixed them up with these Roco sliding hood coil wagons. So I'm going to show you a picture that I actually took at Colton Junction in the early 90s. So let's cut to the picture. I won't tell you how early in the morning that picture was taken, but I was up that day to catch the weed killer doing its rounds around York and Harrogate. And the sun had only just risen, and it was July, I think. Yes, it was early. So when Speedlink was phased out, or was on its way out, a lot of the metals traffic got its own workings, and the early morning hours and overnight were when the outbound ones from Lackenby ran. And that's the only time you would see the BAA coil wagons loaded, running to places like Fogarty's in Blackburn and Wakefield. And I think they look really cool, that mix of the sliding hood wagons. And I'm going to start experimenting, try and come up with a way to do that plastic stuff. So track-wise, there's been a few things I've had to work on. The inner track there, the upline, it used to curve in much more sharply as it came out of the tunnel than it does now. And I kept getting persistent problems with things derailing. Certain wagons, certain combinations of couplings, but they would do it consistently. So I realized I need to replace that. It's not good enough if I can only run 3/4 of my trains into the sidings that way. So up came the curve point, up came the tight curve, and up came the points in the two sidings there. Unfortunately, while I've eased the curve and solved the derailment problem, it meant I couldn't put back the 2 points back to back. There just wasn't enough space. So I'm left with the double slip, Old Faithful. Now that's a code 100 slip, and I've had problems with those. I have two others of those guys. Let's zoom down to the other end here. That line across the middle, see there's that cord that passes the engineer's sidings and lets you cut from one side of the layout to the other, basically reversing direction. So there's two double slips in there, again code 100, and they're not smooth. So many different wagons sort of jump up and down as they go over them, including the latest Bachman and Hornby ones. And I have done the obvious, there's my back-to-back gauge, and that isn't solving the problem. So what I've done, after some research on RM Web and elsewhere, is I ordered a couple of fine-scale double slips. And I have been testing out one with this roughly laid track here, with a lengthy siding, and just running long rakes of wagons backwards and forth over it. No derailment issues. Much smoother. So those two code 100 slips are about to come out, and they're going to be replaced by the fine scale ones. And I've just received a third one, which will replace the one down the other end. There's been lots of other niggling little track smoothness issues, but keep running trains, keep finding them, keep whacking them with a hammer. So it's getting there. It's getting there. Other things I need to work on coming up are lighting. It's a bit dim in here. There's enough light to work with, but it's not enough light to really see everything. Let's just zoom out here. I've just got these light fittings on the ceiling, and it's a mistake I made up front, not putting more lighting in before I started the railway. So what I'm thinking of doing is I have a whole bunch of these LED strips, 5 meters long. I've got one in use underneath here to light the storage yard, and it's enough light. So I might try experimenting with suspending a few of those on a rod or something from the ceiling and seeing if that ups the lighting here as well. Other options are putting some lighting on the wall and just sort of pointing it downwards, but we'll see where we get to. That's something I'll work on over the next year and just see what it needs, see where we get to. So other than that, the landscaping is going to continue. This lot over here is going to march forwards, and there's going to be trees and bushes. And I think I'll work on this section in more detail before I move on to the other parts for the scenic stuff. So that's progress for this year. When I look back to how things were December a year ago, this is really quite a leap forward. So I'm pretty happy with what I've achieved so far this year. Anyway, Merry Christmas everyone, and thank you for watching.